When we left off, I had left you hanging with this claim that you've never seen a triangle. Now, you might be looking at your screen and thinking to yourself, there are two triangles right there. Of course I'm seeing those triangles. Surely you, Andrew, must be seeing those triangles as well. Well, I'll double down, tell you those are not triangles. Think about it. Go back to freshman year geometry and ask yourself, well, what is a triangle? Well, a triangle is supposed to be the shape that's made out of three different lines. What's a line? Well, it's something that is infinitesimally thin. It has length, but no width, and it's perfectly straight. Well, neither of those things that you're looking at on your screen have lines that have no width. If you hold up your pen or your finger to your screen, you'll see that the thickness of those lines is some percentage of the thickness of your finger. If you took a magnifying glass and looked at your screen through that, you'd see that the lines that those triangles are made out of, they're not perfectly straight. They have a jagged edge on them. They're made out of lots of tiny little pixels of light. So neither of those two things you see on your screen is a triangle. It looks like a triangle, but it's not actually a triangle. Now you might say, okay, fine, but if we really wanted to, we could create a real triangle that has perfectly thin lines. Well, no, you couldn't. If you ever created a triangle with a line that had no thickness whatsoever, it would be impossible for you to see that line. So you've never seen a triangle, because if we ever were to create a triangle here in our physical reality, there'd be no way for you to actually ever see it. So Plato takes this insight and he comes up with a theory to try and explain how it is that we know about triangles and that we think about some things as triangles, even though we've never actually seen a triangle. So Plato says, look, we've got all of these things around us in the physical world that we inhabit. So down at the bottom of the screen there, I've got a bunch of different things that we, usually when we're just speaking informally, we'll say, yeah, sure, those things are triangles. But Plato says, well, look, we all know those aren't actually triangles, so how do we know what a triangle is? Well, he says, because there's this other realm. There's a realm that exists outside of space and time that we call the Platonic heaven, or the realm of forms. And in this realm of forms, there is an ideal triangle. Now, it has to exist outside of space because, of course, its lines have no thickness whatsoever, so they can't exist in space. So Plato says the reason why you and I know what a triangle is because you and I, we used to live in this Platonic heaven outside of time and space. It's just that we lived there before we were born, and then when we were born, the trauma of our birth was just so much, it just wiped our memory. And now when we go about this physical world, and we see things like the stuff down at the bottom of the screen there, those things, they just kind of remind us of the ideal form of a triangle. And Plato says, look, our entire physical reality is just like this. Everything that we see here in this physical world around us is just a poor imitation or a copy of the true nature of reality, which exists up in that Platonic heaven. So that explains another thing, namely, well, why it is that all the individual things that we sit down on and we see that are around the bottom of the screen here, why all of those things we think of as couches, even though they look really different one from the other. There's no real similarity that all of those things share. Plato says, well, the reason why they're all couches is because they're all connected in some way to the ideal form of a couch that exists up in the Platonic heaven. And so Plato's theory here can explain a couple things. It explains, one, how we can know about the existence of triangles and other things, even though we've never seen them, and how it is that we can think of all these different sorts of things down here at the bottom of the screen as couches, even though there's not one thing that they all have in common. Now, this theory might sound a little like woo out there for you, but think about it with the case of, say, numbers. Some of you might have seen some of the recent controversy on Twitter where people are arguing back and forth about whether 2 plus 2 equals 4 or whether 2 plus 2 equals 5. Now, one way you might try and solve that dispute is to go out there and find a 2 and see whether when you add it to itself you get a 4 or a 5. But this is a problem since, just like triangles, you ain't never seen an actual 2 out there in the world. Now, sure, you've seen marks on a page or a screen, like 2 plus 2 equals 4, or dos plus dos equals quattro, or if you know a little binary, you can express the same idea by writing 10 plus 10 equals 100. But the question for us is, but what makes all of these statements true or false? It's not like I can take a 2 and set it down on the desk and take a look at it and see whether adding it to itself gives you 4. Plato's theory of the forms says, look, the reason why 2 plus 2 equals 4 is because the numbers 2 and 4, even though they don't exist down here in the world of space and time with you and I, they exist in the Platonic heaven. And in that Platonic heaven, when you have actual numbers 2 and 4, when you add them together, when you add 2 and 2 to itself, you get a 4. And that's why it makes it true that 2 plus 2 equals 4. Or, I suppose, if we went up to that Platonic heaven and discovered, oh my gosh, when you add 2 to yourself, it gets 5, well, then, it could turn out that we've been doing arithmetic wrong all along. All right, so that's Plato's background theory. What we're going to see in the next video is why that background theory leads him to think that art is just really bad and should be banned from our ideal government.